Hello everyone. Today I'd like to take you for a hand I played in a live $250 tournament, which honestly tilted me quite a bit due to my opponent making a very bad call at a point. But I also think looking back at it now, having had a bit of time to relax and sort of calm down, that there's actually quite a lot that we can learn from this hand as well. Not just in terms of different ways I could play it, but also understanding how the opponent should have handled the approach that I took with this particular hand. Now, it's true that for this, there's going to be quite a bit of a process of figuring things out, where I will be sharing the thought process that I had throughout this hand and then kind of compare it with what the solver is giving. So basically, there were about 100 big blinds. I think technically the blinds were 100, 300, but on Tito Wizard, the highest setting was 100. So I kind of just made it 100 big blinds in that setting. But okay, if you're getting really technical, it's 133. But yeah, basically the low jack races and okay, to be fair, in the game you actually raced 800, so it'd be more like 2.7 rather than 2.3. There would still be a pretty similar range, of course, but you'd be probably removing some of the weakest hands if you have a balanced range, like removing all of the hands that are mixing, like the offsuit 10x, the some of this like Queen 8 suited, Jack 8 suited, King 6 suited, 9 7 suited, maybe you're removing some of the suited connectors as well, or at least playing them less frequently at this higher sizing. But that's in theory. In practice, I didn't really have enough info on this guy to know what his low jack sort of raising strategy would be. But I did notice this game people tended to raise about 3x the big blind first in rather than the standard 2.3x. And so I figured, okay, in theory the range should be tighter, but in reality it's probably a somewhat similar range or maybe even a little bit wider, like maybe adding some of the suited 7x, maybe some extra offsuit aces and maybe some offsuit nines here. Just because, people tend to play too many hands in these Australian live games. That was the feeling I got from looking at my table as a general observation. But okay, we can kind of clearly see what range we are sort of up against from the low jack. And then, yeah, high jack folds and it goes to the cutoff who decides to flat at this point. And so you can sort of see again what in theory their range should be. Of course, whether this is their actual range in practice is not obvious by any means. Like for example, I might be leaving out some of say the king six suited, king seven suited, king eight suited, maybe leaving out some of these suited gappers, and maybe instead replacing them with some weaker, ace X, again, just based on the general tendency that a lot of these live players will tend to play too many ace X's called calls. Maybe some king 10 offsuit, queen 10 offsuit, jack 10 offsuit. So the range might be a little bit wider than this, but it still gives us a reasonable general idea. And also, a lot of these players are not finding these free bets this deep stacked with the suit connectors. So again, like if you had a free betting range, maybe it would be more of these hands like ace king, ace queen off, ace jack suit, ace 10 suited, and maybe a bit less of these low pocket to mid pocket pairs and suit connectors, and maybe a few less suit aces that might also flat from say a less studied player. But still, it gives us a reasonable idea of the kind of range that we're up against. And obviously, when you're up against two ranges and it goes to me in the button here, of course, you can see here I end up free betting. But I think it's worth sort of sharing how the range that we have is going to be a little bit different based on the fact that we're up against two ranges rather than one. It means that, hands like, the ace 10 offsuit, king jack off, queen jack off are just folding because these hands just don't play very well multi-way. Because when you're in a multi-way pot, usually the best hand is going to be a hand like two pair, set, straights, or flushes. And these sort of hands like ace 10 offsuit, king jack offsuit, queen jack offsuit, jack 10 offsuit, these kind of hands tend to make good top pairs, but they're not going to really usually be the best hand multi-way unless a lot of things really go your way. And likewise, yeah, sort of some hands like say King 7 suit, King 6 suit, King 5 suit, which in a different universe might be potential free bet bluffs. Yeah, are just pure folds now. And so in terms of the range, I was basically had Ace Jack suited in this hand. Now, in terms of hand, I'm going to look at how the entire range plays each street because I think that really allows us to learn a lot more than if we just compare, oh, did we play it correctly according to the solver? We can sort of see, yeah, that basically, the obvious value hands that we're raising are going to be the, aces all the way to tens, with nines and eights and sevens kind of mixing a bit more. And also we can see, yeah, the kind of the suited broadways really like to free bet because they just play really well post flop, but also, can potentially get some better hands to fold. But if we get called, like say with, Jack 10 suited, like we're still usually going to be quite live there. And you'll notice, yeah, hands like ace queen offsuit, ace jack off do tend to prefer flatting a little bit more just to kind of protect the flatting range so that we can also, flat with like the weak pocket pairs, bunch of suited aces, the suited 9x, a few of the suited gappers, suited connectors. It's much easier to play those effects, but we also have some good ace x in our range so that if the board comes ace high, we can still have some very strong hands. But yeah, in terms of the free betting range at the time, I was thinking that, okay, ace jack suited, the time I understood that you could also theoretically flat it, I just felt it would play a lot better as a free bet because these guys were basically way underfolding the free bets in past hands. And so I realized I would get called by a lot of worse suited aces, maybe just some worse offsuit aces just based on general tendencies. I'd probably get called by a lot of these different suited connected type hands or suited broadways. And so that's kind of why I went for the race with the free bet with the ace jack suited. And I do think that there's a little bit of an exploit when you are playing live players that these hands are kind of mixing between free bet and call. Obviously, the most balanced strategy in Solverland is to, be balanced, like sometimes free bet, sometimes call. But as a general principle, you're probably going to make more money against most people if you just kind of play hands like just as a free bet rather than kind of mixing too much. Obviously, if free bet every single one of these hands are mixed, then yeah, you're going to be free betting too much. And yeah, that can leave you vulnerable to being sort of four bet quite a lot, which would force you to fold a lot of these hands, like the 9x suited ones. But what you could do is you could sort of have like pick out some of these hands. There'll be like a sort of raising hands and then just pure call with the others. So an example might be maybe you decide to like pure raise with ace five suited and ace eight suited, and then just kind of flat all the other ones that are weaker than ace 10 suited. And just by making it like 100% rather than say 50-50 or whatever, like 100% or 0%, it's not going to be perfect based on GTO, but it's at least going to allow you to execute the strategy a lot more precisely without it being anywhere near as complicated as, say, remembering, for example, that we raise 8-7 suited 20% of the time or something like that, because it's going to be harder to get those numbers exactly right. If you're enjoying the video so far, then do make sure to like the video and also to subscribe for more like this one. Anyway, I raise with the ace jack of hearts and the blinds fold, and it goes to the low jack. I will be going to a separate tab. I'll explain why in a moment. But again, you can sort of see how the low jack is responding to a free bet squeeze here. Again, the fact that there's two players, other players in the pot, really influences the ranges quite a lot. Where now against the free bet, it has to be quite a lot tighter. To the point where, yeah, if you look at the flatting range, it's going to be all of the pocket pairs. Although to be fair, like if you decide to fold like the threes, fours, and fives, you can see you're only losing like 0.01 of a big blind. So against a player who is sort of under free bet bluffing, like if they're not finding any of the free bet bluffs, then honestly folding like the fives to freeze, even potentially the twos would probably actually be quite a good exploit. Again, the hands like ace four suit, ace five suited could also almost just like pure fold, and you probably wouldn't be losing that much like in practice from doing that. Obviously, it's calling with some of these hands, to basically protect the range so that if the board comes low cards, you have a potential straight on the board and you have potential sets on the board. So just a way to protect your range on a wide range of different board pairings, as it were. But yeah, you can see that, the against a free bet squeezy, suited connectors weaker than Jack 10 suited just folding. Hands like King Queen off are folding, even Ace Queen offsuit is kind of mixing. And when it four bets, it's obviously four betting as a bluff, trying to get some of the, hands like Jack 10, 9, 8, some of these 12 hands to potentially fold in a sense. So yeah, basic, and also you're blocking Ace King is, and Ace is kind of the other point behind it. But yeah, that's basically sort of showing the strategy there. You're going to be sort of flatting with a lot of the suited broadways, so sort of ace jack suited, ace 10 suited, ace queen off, and basically the pocket pairs and a couple of these suited aces just for board coverage essentially. That's going to be the flatting range in theory, but I think in practice, because people tend to way over defend against free bets, even though I did use, trying to remember exactly the size I used, because I think I might have sized up slightly. Like I'm trying to remember what the sizing was I used, given it was a live setting, as it were. 'Cause I don't think it was exactly 8.5 big blinds, but I think it was pretty close to it from what I recall. Um, anyway, I digress. So low jack does end up calling, but yeah, in practice they're probably calling a lot of these offsuit broadways, probably a lot of this suited ace X in practice that should just be folding. So they're probably over defending compared to this, but it is what it is. And likewise, when you sort of have these station players who are just going to call down, like if they call a raise, they're usually going to call the free bet anyway because they feel that they're priced in. And yeah, to be fair, it is true that yeah, these different suit connectors do have decent board coverage. But again, when someone has sort of flatted a free bet when the player's free bet, it does force you to be a lot tighter. Hands like King Queen offsuit become a fold, Queen Nine suited. Some of these weaker suited kings and some of the worst suited aces like Ace Two suited, Ace Six suited, and yeah, even Ace Seven suited kind of mixing the folds. And if you are wondering, why is it that Ace Five suited, Ace Four suited, Ace Three suited have more equity than Ace Six suited? It's based or A7 suited. It's because these ace five suited, you can make a wheel draw. So if the board comes 2, 3, 4, you have a straight. Whereas with ace six suited, you kind of need four cards to come on the board to get a straight. And when you do get it, it's unlikely to be the nut straight. Like if you have, well, like I guess if you have 2, 3, 4, 5, it's a different story, but you still lose to 6, 7, for example. Whereas that's a little bit less of a problem, say, when you've got, 2, 3, 4, and you have ace five suited on, as it were. But yeah, that sort of shows how the range should look. I'm not going to give away exactly what this cutoff had, but basically, yeah, here the solution's a bit incomplete because you can see that solution is currently pre-flop only, that there isn't really well, there are multi-way solvers, but not in this setup of Cheat Wizard that I have. And to be fair, when I have briefly looked at post-flop sort of solvings, it tends to assume that people are finding all sorts of random bluffs in multi-way spots that I find is usually not the case in practice, that people do tend to play quite honestly. But yeah, in order to basically have it as a solve, I had to make some adjustments so that it would at least show some sort of, setting from a solver. So again, it's true that there will be some adaptations if you would actually solve freeways, but I'll do my best to kind of explain what the differences are, both from a practical and sort of a theoretical point of view. But yeah, it basically shows the setting as if the cutoff had raised, and okay, we can understand this raising range is a bit tighter when some, or the flying range is a bit tighter than the raising range, which makes sense. But yeah, then with the button free band, you can see that okay, this is not a 100% accurate range. That this is because here it's showing that ace jack suited is mostly flatting when it's just a cutoff open raise, whereas against a raise and a flat, yeah, the ace jack suited becomes part of the free betting range. And I have to admit, this isn't something I really had studied as deep as maybe should have going into the event, but I kind of made that sort of correct adjustment on the fly, as it were, with two players being in the pot. So yeah, if you look at the range, like to be fair, it's actually going to be pretty similar. I mean, there are some differences in the range. I can see, the sort of the weaker parts range, like the ace jack off, king jack off, queen nine suited, 10, 8, 9, 7. Some of these hands are in this sort of other range, which are not in this sort of range here. But we can sort of see it's not the world's greatest difference. Like we can kind of figure out the differences and sort of adapt from there. So with that, we do get to the flop, which, as you can see here, yeah, is just a 9, 8, 5 two-tone. And since we have the ace jack of hearts, this does mean that in this instance, yeah, we don't have a flush draw and we don't have a backdoor flush draw. With the jack in our hand, it is true that we have the backdoor straight. Like if a 10 or a queen comes, or 10 to 7, then yeah, we get a very, very nice straight to work with. So that is kind of working in our favor there. But other than that, yeah, we basically have ace high. So as you can see, yeah, the cutoff is just going to check range, and yeah, that's the way it played out, where the low jack checked and the cutoff checked to me. It's a nice thing, like basically really the way to maximize your winnings in the long term when playing these sort of live, like very soft events, is basically to just play big pots in position with superior hands. Well, we're in position because we're in the button, and we have a superior hand because they're raising too wide and flatting free bets way too wide. And we also have a really good hand because ace jack suit is basically a value free bet, not a bluff free bet in this spot. Now I do throw in a bunch of bluff free bets. I try to keep the range between value and bluffs balanced, of course. Even against like players who are not very good, like I will still make sure to have some bluffs that are just not very predictable to play. But yeah, looking at this, we can kind of see it's sort of a interesting spot where kind of a lot of the range is just mixing that. Yeah, there are some hands that are more checks than bets, and actually the hand I have ace jack suited, it is one that yeah, in theory I should just be checking most of the time. And yeah, to be fair, I'll share with you my thought process I had during the hand. Like the first thing I understood is that okay, these guys have wider ranges than what they really should in this spot was kind of the first thing that I realized. So I felt that for that reason, I could sort of justify almost just doing a range bet in this spot, and then it would be unlikely to sort of be a significant mistake, let's say. And also, I kind of thought, well, with the jack, I do have the backdoor draw, which means that, let's say, if the turn comes like a 10 or a maybe a 7 isn't so clear because they might have some 6x, but if the turn comes like a 10 or let's say it comes a queen, well, I can sort of keep firing on that. Obviously, it comes a jack or a ace, well, I have top pair, so again, I can keep firing. So I felt that kind of the overcard hands were sort of hands that maybe not the most obvious bluffs per se, because the ace checking down does have a decent amount of showdown value, which is kind of why you see a lot of this ace king, ace queen, ace jack, ace five, like a lot of these hands with some showdown value checking it down. Whereas there's some of these hands like ace two suited, ace three suited, ace four suited. These hands are not really in the range of having much showdown value because a lot of the time you're just going to run into a better ace X if it just goes checked free streets. Because if they don't have showdown value, they're usually going to bet turn or river unless they're like completely honest players. But yeah, basically with this instance, we can kind of see that they're looking at our range, yeah, like our ace high. If we do some quick math here, it's in like the top yeah, basically our ace high is in the top like it's between like 65% to about 35%, 65%. So it's kind of like in the middle like that. Those middle hands are often like in terms of your range, like where they are, do will tend to check quite a bit. So yeah, that sort of explains why like solve the land, yeah, I probably should just check in this spot. But I felt that in a multi-way situation that okay, because my free bet squeezing range is tighter than my free bet than sort of like it would be otherwise I just free bet calls, like with just one person in. I kind of made this adjustment that okay, maybe in that case, a lot of my ace-X hands, like these overcard ace-X, should be the ones that kind of fire, and in a multi-way spot that maybe the hands like say ace four suit, ace three, ace deuce, like some of these ones like just don't have like a lot of value, or maybe a bit better to kind of just check back in a multi-way spot. So it's kind of why I decided, okay, I shouldn't have that many bluffs multi-way in general, because I'm the pre-flop aggression because they're going too wide. But the overcards I just felt made the most logical bluffs. So, I mean, a hand like, Queen Jack suited, well, Queen 10 is, Queen Jack are really nice because they have the gut shots. These are really nice ones to fire as such. You can see Jack 10 suited is going to check a little bit because with the open ender, yeah, you don't really want to kind of get raised off your equity is sort of the idea. So that's why you'll often see the open enders check in these sorts of spots. Like a 6-7 is 7-6 is just a straight, but yeah, as it happens, I did decide to fire for 25%. And while it's true, this is just for a heads up simulation, so multi way, the answer might be a little bit different. Like it might even go for a smaller size, but I do think that the sizing I used, the 25% pot, probably is the correct sizing because I think that, well, basically, when I was sort of sharing this hand with one of my poker friends, my local ones in Australia, he kind of made this point that a board like 9-8-5 two-tone is going to be quite decent for the player who flattered twice for their range. However, I don't necessarily disagree with that. I also think that this sort of board is just very good for the buttons range. As the free bet, like I have virtually all the overpairs. Like let's say if we look at this sort of calling range and he's going to be free betting, he's going to be four betting most of his overpairs, like only the tens is the only overpair that's like flatting more than it's raising. So I kind of have like all the overpairs really in this sort of situation. And I think that yeah, the fact just have this nut advantage and also a range advantage because he called twice and the other guy flagged the free bet just allows me, I think, to almost just bet like a very large number of hands for a small sizing. So I go 25%, the low jack does fold. My guess is that he probably just has some weaker ace, like maybe ace 10. I mean, he could even have like ace queen offsuit or, could be a very needy player as like ace king offsuit because he was a little bit of an older guy. But I mean, to be fair, I'm not sure if ace king is ever really folding because these guys are, I think, a little bit stationary in hindsight. But the cutoff does end up falling, which, I mean, he is going to do with a reasonable chunk of his range that, he's folding a lot of the ace X because, well, he kind of wants me to have the ace X because that's where a decent chunk of the bluffs are going to come from. So that's kind of why those hands are folding. But as long as he has basically a gut shot or better, he's basically going to continue in his spot. And it makes sense with ace queen suited that you need the back door for it to be a consistent call. But even the hands that are, I think in this sort of in a heads up situation. So in a heads up situation, yeah, the hands like ace queen even are suited even without the backdoor draw are still going to be calling more often than folding, not just the tiniest amount. That being said, I think that in a multi-way situation, you would be making some adjustments to this, where, for example, you probably would be just flatting the gut shots rather than raising. I mean, in a multi-way, I guess you could potentially raise the open-enders, that those sort of hands may become your bluffs. But there is only Jack 10 suited, so it's true. You do need to find some bluffs from elsewhere, but you might have, say, I mean, I guess, yeah, hands like A6, A7 suited, you can kind of see why these might be sort of bluffing because of the fact you've got the gut shot to go with the ace high. And yeah, it seems to really like doing it when you've got the flush draws. So just going to, I think, be a lot of the combo draws are where the bluffs are really going to come from the cutoffs raising range. But you can see in general, they're not really doing a lot of raising in this spot. It's like thick value, just a few of the best bluffs, even in a heads up spot here. And I think multi-way, a lot of these other bluffs are just going to kind of go away a little bit. Yeah, kind of interesting to see sixes and sevens, yeah, getting in there and raising a small portion, but still generally calling because again, you would be in a really yuck spot if you get free bets in this situation, which I think actually, yeah, if he does free bet, that does raise here, like it's something that I would need to sort of check. Like I'm not going to check it right now, but it wouldn't shock me if hands like Ace King were meant to like free bet bluff in that spot in my shoes, like in solver land. Of course, like in live, it's probably not the smartest idea, but it's how some of these things work. But yeah, he does end up calling. The turn is the ten of spades as such, and yeah, with this turn card, it makes sense that he's just going to be checking range here because well, I'm the one who bets. And because he only called in range, it means that his range is basically capped at this point, which is of course something I understood when he flats my bet and doesn't raise. Then the best hand he can really have is going to be well. Okay, we can see he is slow playing some 7-6 occasionally in solver land, a little bit of 9-8, but at least in a live setting, yeah, he's probably going to raise two pair or better on such a Court 8 board. So in a sense, he's kind of capped at ace nine as sort of the best hand he kind of has realistically at this point. Or he could have played like some Jack 10, I guess that also saying got a pair or like ace 10 suited maybe. So yeah, I guess those are the best hands capped. Like he's really capped at top pair here. And when they're capped at top pair, it does allow you to do some different moves. And yeah, I sort of had this feeling that well at the time that his range is sort of capped, but I also was thinking what is kind of the best size exploitatively at this point. And yeah, once again, we can kind of see that the Silver is really liking the bet quite widely. It does make sense given that, we're sort of going to be, I guess, being a little bit more polar as each street goes on, but still betting with a quite wide range just because, yeah, we've got like I think if I remember correctly, yeah, Queen Jack suit, I think is going to be one of the bluffs pre-flop. I can always go back. But yeah, Queen Jack suit, like just a pure free bet bluff just about in that case. So yeah, on that turn, yeah, we've got the Queen Jack. I mean, we've got the 7-6 suited still as well because we're free betting out a little bit for board coverage. Of course, we still have the overpairs and like the sets like tens, nines, eights, fives, this sort of thing. So yeah, I think that I did choose the correct sizing here. Yeah, with ace jack, it's kind of interesting to see that yeah, you're also going to be checking it some of the time that again you're having a bit of a mixed strategy because you do have the open ender and you do have some showdown values. So it's why you will check some of the time because you do want to protect your checking range and have it so that if a queen or a seven comes on the river, that's also in your checking range as well as your betting range. But overall, I think I'm happy with the sizing I chose at 50%. I feel like it is a good sizing here just to kind of get a lot of the sort of low pair hands of his, like the 5x and the sixes, sevens, just kind of get maybe not sevens, but certainly the sixes to kind of fold. And even if he has a hand like sort of an eight or a nine, it also puts him in a little bit of a tough spot as well, especially setting it up for the river. So I think that overall, yeah, I think I played this correctly with the 50% sizing. And yeah, not really any other size are not really being used much in general. So yeah, at this point, basically you can sort of see like the thresholds here, like what are worst hands that one should call with, and we can kind of see that, yeah, it's the sevens or, well, okay, if it's like sevens, yeah, that's basically kind of the worst hand. Actually, not the absolute worst hand, but like kind of the worst hand that's a pair that's sort of calling well, along with 5-4 suited, but yeah, the 5-4 suited that's calling. Okay, I guess the logic there is it's sort of like unblocking a lot of the bluffs. Like say if we go back to the button range, then yeah, it's sort of going to be bluffing with a lot of this 7x and 6x kind of gut shots. So it sort of makes sense, yeah, that 5-4 suited is actually a good bluff catcher in the sense that it does block it does block like the bluffs with the six and the sevens, or unblocks the bluffs rather with the 6x and 7x. So that kind of explains, yeah, why these hands are still continuing. Whereas, yeah, the hands like with just the gutty are just going to be folding in this situation. And yeah, like with 8-7 suit, like you do have the open ender to go with it. With 8-6, so you do have the gut shots. That's kind of why you see these hands starting to call a little bit more. Okay, 8-6 suit is true. It is kind of bluff raising some of the time, trying to get, some hands like a better 8x or a 9x or whatever the fold, or even just clean up the equity against overcards. But okay, that's also a play that is a little bit advanced and maybe not the most likely for, for someone to find in a live game, let's say. And just to explain what the logic is, we're sort of raising a hand like 8-6 suited from the cutoff's point of view. Basically, the idea is that you're going to be able to potentially get some better hands to fold. Like you might get a ace-8 suited, or like some of these 8x hands that are like better than your one with better kicker to fold. But if you do get called, you do still have outs with with the seven kind of coming, or even potentially hitting a six or another eight could also be good. So you do still have outs against some hands that are better than yours, say if they call it ace-10 suited, for example. But you're also going to get called by some worse hands, where you might get called by like an ace king, for example, like an ace king with a flush draw, or you might also get caught by maybe a weaker pair, like maybe a 6-5 suited that still is continuing because of the gut shot and a weak pair, like say 6-5. Well, you can't have 6-5 of diamonds here, I guess, but yeah, like say a 6-5 of clubs or whatever. So that's sort of like the idea, like you're gonna get called by some worse hands, and you also could potentially fold out better hands at the same time, while still not being dead against the better hands that call you. Now, of course, if it's a very dry board, then yeah, sort of the bluffs become a little bit trickier, like they become a little bit more intuitive than this, of like weak pair plus draw. But still, it's kind of an interesting concept to sort of consider, like to not just look at like what are the obvious bluffs, but like what are kind of the non-obvious bluffs that may need to be added, say on a dry board to be able to have that right balance of value to bluffs in our betting range or in our raising range. But yeah, I think in a live setting, if you raise with 8-6, you're probably getting called by, by 8-7. So you're kind of just value owning yourself, I think, in live if you incorporate these plays, like unless you're playing against another like really strong pro. But anyway, he does end up falling, which does turn out to be a mistake. He actually should have folded. Like kind of the spoiler alert, I'll share what hand he had. He actually had pocket sixes in this spot. And I mean, especially with it being multi-way, I think that with it being multi-way, it also kind of should make you even tighter than what's being shown here. But yeah, he had six of I think he had the six of diamonds. I'm trying to remember what the other one he had was, whether it was the club or whether it was the spade to go with the six of diamonds. But okay, I don't think it doesn't make that big of a difference in all fairness. I'm just going to say it was like the six of clubs because yeah, I think it just sort of fits more easily. But yeah, like with the six of diamonds, six of clubs, you can see how he's basically just losing one big blind with this call because he's only beating a very small number of my hands, and even the hands the plus hand he's beating, like I still have equity to outdraw. Whereas the hands he's just getting crushed by has very little equity against. Like he'd be relying on a 6 or a 7 hitting, and even that might not be enough in some cases. Like if I have if I have the jack, for example, like say if the 7 comes on the river, then yeah, he might have a straight, but he loses 20 jack X, and I will have a decent number of jacks in the bluffing range on my end, like the, king jack, queen jack, ace jack that I used here. So that's kind of another reason. Like he also has very bad reversed implied odds, but okay, if a player understands reverse implied odds, they're probably playing better than $250 events live. But I digress a bit. So, and again, you can sort of see with the calling range here, like sevens is sort of, yeah, the worst hand you should really be calling with, aside from some of these bluff catches like the ace queen suited, king queen suited with the, with the drawers, and yeah, like ace jack suited obviously is an open ender, so it kind of makes sense that those ones are going to be, continuing in that instance. But anyway, yeah, continuing to how it played. I was just thinking if there are any raises. Yeah, you can see some like king jack suited, ace jack suited, queen ten suited. Yeah, you can see some of those hands kind of raising like 10-9 and the obvious heavy value. But okay, let's get to the river, which is the 10 of diamonds, which I mean I kind of realized looking at it that yeah, it's not the ideal card for me to have the 10 because yeah, he will be potentially flatting some. I mean to be fair, like the ace 10 suited, king 10 suited should kind of yeah folded on the flop anyway, unless you had a flush draw. But okay, there's already a diamond, so it kind of takes out the front door flush draws in that case. So maybe it's not as bad a card for me actually as I thought it was at the time. But yeah, it sort of makes sense again that because I bet twice because I'm quite polar, he is going to be doing a lot of checking, like even checking back. Yes, well, I mean, so basically you'll be betting out like the 10x for value, and the bluffs are going to kind of come from the jack x, like the king jack suited, and the ace jack suited. Okay, it makes sense. It's sort of interesting actually to see that. Yeah, you well, I was going to make another comment, and I just realized the flush came in. So yeah, it makes sense that the flush is just yeah betting for value. Whereas yeah, if it's the flush does come in, then yeah, it's just checking. But yeah, sort of seeing how it played out, yeah, you're just generally going to be checking range, except for like the really thick value and yeah, a few sort of bluffs like well, okay, again, we can see these kind of nut flushes that are going for it here. So that kind of explains, yeah. Basically, you're just betting like 10x flushes and that's basically it, yeah. So and yeah, like a little bit of like the king jack of clubs. That's merely a very very specific hand to have here. Anyway, he checks and at this point, just hold on a sec. Just bear with me for one moment because it shows him as betting, but actually, yeah, it should be a check rather. Okay, so yeah, we're fixing it on the fly, and also I'll be discovering for myself for the first time, yeah, if I played it correctly or not. And yeah, at this point, I think I might have maybe got a little bit too maybe a little bit too clever for my own good based on what the solver is showing. Because yeah, at this point. Actually, maybe my play's not as bad as I thought. Maybe it's not great, but yeah, maybe it's not as bad as I thought it would be. So basically, I have like ace jack of hearts. You can sort of see yeah, that at this point, it's saying that I should just sort of give up on the diamond river coming in because of some bluffs coming through. But yeah, I guess like from the way he played, I guess I realized that there weren't really many sort of flushes in his range, and I also felt I don't really have a lot of worse hands than ace jack suited when I sort of bet multi-way. So it's kind of case I made a bit of an adjustment in my mind where I thought, okay, if it was a heads up pot, then yeah, I should probably just check the ace jack suit and say I maybe still have a little bit of showdown value. But at the time, I just didn't feel I had any showdown value whatsoever when he calls down in with a bet into a freeway pot. That's just almost always going to be a pair or better. And a lot of the draws did kind of get there. So I just felt that it was just a logical spot to kind of fire. So I ended up like firing, I think, about half pot from memory, maybe a little bit over half pot. So yeah, so it ends up being like about a 60% bet. And yeah, you can sort of see like looking at it, yeah, it tends to just prefer the all-in sizing. That's it's enough, yeah, with the ace jack of hearts, yeah, it doesn't really like this all-in sizing that yeah, it just tends to prefer it more with the flushes, as it were. But yeah, you could sort of say like I chose like the let's say the least bad kind of sizing that yeah, with this sizing like technically I use like 0.04 big blinds with being heads up. But I do feel like if it was kind of based on factoring in the multi-way situation at actual ranges, I think it would probably be sort of less bad in this setting. Like probably would still check in general, but I think yeah that betting it out and like the half pot is not as bad as the solver's making out. Just like I said, like checking out and going really makes sense if you have showdown value, and I just don't think you ever have any showdown value in this on this particular river card. And it's also true, like you will be sort of betting a lot of tens on the flops. I just think that with that and also leading out on the turn, that it just really hits my range very, very well. He's also very capped, and I figured, okay, if I bet half pot, he's going to have to fold quite a lot of hands that are better than mine, at least in theory. That, for example, like the sixes. Okay, it's interesting that sevens do actually mix some calls a little bit um when you do have like the diamond hand because you're blocking the draws. But yeah, because obviously like sixes shouldn't even be here in the first place. They should have folded on the turn. But yeah, it would still be a fold in that instance because you're only beating bluffs, and like the bluffs I kind of have are yeah just going to be well, I mean even hands like if we go back here, like even it's not in the range, like even sevens, for example, for me would be like kind of one of the bluffs in this instance potentially. Because you can see that yeah, like 8-7 suit is kind of like bluffing with sort of a similar strength hand. So he's like not even beating all of the bluffs I have in this spot. In fact, I can just check that just to make sure I'm not misreading it. Okay, to be clear, yeah, it's actually it's the suited one, like the flush that is betting like that. Yeah, the non-suited ones are actually just checking that spot. But yeah, still we can kind of see like there aren't really that many hands he's actually beating when I sort of go for this bet. Yeah, if you look at this, like yeah, just a lot of value really with this kind of sizing. That the bluffs here coming from yeah, what even are the bluffs here? Like some random ace free suited and king free suited, which is like not very oddly specific. These are like the most human bluffs by any means here. So I think yeah, in this case, like you should probably have just folded the sixes here. And then yeah, the calls, it's again kind of interesting that even like queen nine suited, king nine suited, ace nine suited, a lot of these hands are just folding just because of the fact they do block a lot of the bluffs here. Yeah, like even jacks are meant to fold because again you're kind of blocking the jack X bluff. So it's kind of interesting how yeah sevens are kind of mixing some calls a little bit with a diamond and jacks are folding. But yeah, in the end he made the call and he had the sixes with like the six of diamonds and the six of clubs. I think I said it was. So yeah, that was kind of a frustrating one where you could say that my opponent sort of made a bad call on the turn and river and kind of got rewarded for it. I mean, in his defense, I do think that sevens and sixes are kind of a similar sort of hand, but it's also true that, yeah, like with the sevens, that, yeah, I mean, with the sevens, you are kind of blocking like I guess Jack seven's not really in my range, but I do have like some blocker potential, like I think more so than the sixes. So I'd still say that sixes, yeah, should still fold in this spot if you do get to river, because if you look at like 6-5 suit, which has like very similar blocking properties to sixes, you can see that it's still just basically just folding in general in this spot. It's not really not making those calls, as it were. And same with like 5-4 suit again, similar sort of strength, like you're only hitting some of the bluffs and you're just not really hitting enough bluffs to really make sense to call. And I think especially when you're playing live, that people just tend to way over under bluff with rivers in most cases. So I think in that case you could honestly just pure fold these hands. You probably would save yourself a lot of money. But yeah, that's a hand I wanted to share. Like I think that I mean, I can see like I actually probably played it actually better than I thought I did because at the time I wasn't entirely sure about my flop and my turn actions, but apparently they were the best ones. Whereas I was kind of almost certain that I did the river the best way, and yet it turns out that yeah, in that spot maybe I didn't play it optimally. That yeah, like I think that probably the sizing I used is actually probably correct, but yeah, like it was sort of a case where I sort of knew I'd lose the pot if I checked, and I just felt that yeah, he would just not be able to stand the pressure if I just bet. Like I think in a live saying, yeah, the fact that you're meant to fold jacks in this kind of spot, I think in a live saying and someone who's like not just complete station like my opponent was, like they're honestly I think going to be folding like nearly all the 8x, like they might even fold all the 9x in this kind of spot. I mean, obviously the 10x they're continuing, but like they're probably in reality like they're calling with jacks and they're folding all the knights, like not even sort of mixing, but just pure folding 9x and 8x. You can kind of see how that can be quite effective, and yeah, also kind of interesting to see like how in Solverland, yeah, this is kind of very different from a human sort of situation, but yeah, seeing like how there are some of these all-ins as well. I think these all-ins are just all the flushes. So yeah, that kind of makes sense that it's just like very heavily weighted towards value. And yeah, I'm trying to even find like what the bluffs even are. I guess sevens is kind of the bluff jam in this spot. Like if you have a seven of diamonds because you block flushes. So, but okay, that's something that's very hard for a human to find this sort of raise because the people who do try it, they have this experience getting like lick tank called by some 8x and just feeling like a complete idiot. So that tends to put off most humans from playing these sort of things in practice. But anyway, I hope that you enjoyed this breakdown, this hand. I know this one was a little bit long. I'll try to work on being a little bit more efficient with the breakdowns and make them a little bit more watchable. But I do think that going through this process of not just like taking how should I play my hand, but seeing how whole range plays on each street, I think you do learn quite a lot more from it and is well worth the extra time investment. And honestly, it's probably not something that I do enough. So that's why I decided to sort of renew my GTO Wizard membership and to sort of make more use of it and really study a lot of these different spots rather than just thinking it purely from the human point of view. Because often what comes naturally is not always going to be what's actually correct. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed it. Let me know in the comments below what your thoughts were on this hand. If you thought that maybe myself, my opponent should have played it differently, then definitely interested to hear that. But yeah, I'll see you in the next one. Take care.